You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
The coronavirus pandemic, which has affected every aspect of life worldwide, has brought the awareness of personal health and well-being to the forefront of human consciousness. The crisis has also altered the path of how future wellness hospitality evolves across the world. While wellness tourism has been on the rise for the last several years, it's hit its stride this year as countries navigate the pandemic. While other facets of the tourism industry struggle to move forward, some resorts are seeing substantially higher booking rates compared to last year, with the most critical factors for success being drivability, wellness-centric amenities, and the perceived safety provided by remote destinations. Many travel industry experts believe for the affluent, seeking out sustainable, regenerative hotels and experiences will become a priority. One unique hotel group was already ahead of the curve. Since its launch in 1995, Six Senses has been one of the world's leading operators of top-tier luxury hotels, resorts, and spas with a globally renowned reputation for wellness and sustainability. And my guest today on The Luxury Item is Neil Jacobs, Chief Executive Officer at Six Senses. Neil oversees a portfolio of 19 resorts in some of the world's most desirable locations, from the Maldives and the Seychelles to Yau Noi in Thailand and Portugal's Douro Valley, and coming in 2021, the launch of Six Senses New York, its first urban hotel in the United States. Six Senses has been recognized through a host of industry awards and accolades, including Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure, Time Magazine, and Skift, to name a few. With over 3 decades of executive experience in operations and development, Neil is one of the most well-respected leaders in the travel industry, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show today. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks, Scott. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. Now, you're in Singapore, and from what I understand, Singapore has been doing a really great job of containing the coronavirus.
Very true. I mean, we don't have any cases here right now, and life is relatively normal, other than the fact that the borders are still closed. So I haven't left since March, which is unusual for me to be in one place. And but I still have to do 2 weeks quarantine if I come back in a facility here. So I'm not too crazy about that idea. I'm here for a while.
Well, I have to congratulate you on Travel and Leisure. The readers voted Six Senses the #1 hotel brand in the world for 3 years in a row from 2017 to 2019. You have to share, like, what's the secret sauce behind why luxury travelers love the Six Senses brand?
Well, firstly, thanks for that. And I mean, I think when we first won it the first year, we were probably as surprised as many others as well. And you know, 3 years in a row, we were kind of pretty proud, and the team were super excited about it. And you know, it was the first time, according to Jackie at Travel and Leisure, that any one group had won it 3 times. But I think it's very much about, you know, the values of the company. Honestly, I mean, pretty honest about what we do, and the content that we have within the properties. It's pretty healthy, the living, but I think more than anything, it was to do with our values of wellness and sustainability, and that people are just compelled to kind of move in those circles, and the takeaways that they want from, you know, a luxury hotel experience are perhaps different to what they were 10 or 20 years ago. And I think, and we'll probably talk a lot about wellness and sustainability, but that's a big driver of our success, we believe, with Travel and Leisure.
Yeah, but but there's something about the brand itself that must resonate with these travelers, because there are a lot of luxury resorts around the world in remote locations. Some talk about wellness, which we'll get into in a second. But what is it about the brand that connects with these travelers?
I think, you know, our take on luxury is very much about less is more. So we're pretty understated as luxury hotels go. The way they look, the way they feel, the way we operate them. We're definitely not about crystal chandeliers and polished marble. They're very organic. They're very they're very truthful in their intent, if you like, and I think that really resonates with a certain type of traveler today that is kind of no longer so interested in anything that's a bit overstated or anything that's, dare I say, ritzy. And our approach to sustainable construction and design and the materials that we use really do resonate with our psychographic, if you like. So I really believe that that's a huge part of it.
The term wellness is so overused and abused these days. When you hear a wellness hotel, you think a luxury hotel with a really nice spa or fitness center. How does Six Senses define wellness, and how is it ingrained in its culture?
Well, I think first of all, I need to answer that. Talk about wellness travelers a bit, because there are two types of wellness traveler, and the primary traveler is the person that goes to a destination spa such as Miraval or Canyon Ranch or what have you, that are there for very very designed programs and packages and so on. And then the secondary traveler is somebody that wants to know that there's a really nice spa, and they'll go there and they'll do a few treatments and so on. We are somewhere in the middle. Purposely, we're not in the destination spa business, but we do want to offer content and programming that is much deeper than what would typically be the case in a property where you get the secondary traveler. Our approach to wellness is extremely layered. So although we're not preachy about it, you can go as deep as you want to go, or you can do very little. And the possibilities are there, from full days and what we call reconnection days or wellness days. Or you can do nothing and just lie on the beach. But even by doing nothing, the food that you eat, the environments that you're in, the materials that are used to build the hotel are way healthier than would be in most properties. Or if you want to be on a sleep program or an Eat with Six Senses program or our version of anti-aging, you can do that as well. So it's really about giving the customer or the guest a huge amount of choice to do as much as they're comfortable in doing or as little as they wish to do.
What role does content play? I know Six Senses turns out a lot of content. You have these wellness innovation team.
Well, we are very focused on staying ahead of the curve and really trying to roll out new programming every year, so that there's always new initiatives and new things for our guests to try. For example, I mean, last year we took a look. We've always been pretty focused on Asian healing arts. I mean, we do a lot of traditional Chinese medicine. We do a lot of Ayurveda in many of our properties. But in 2019, we took a look at energy medicine, and it was something that we were very interested in, but hadn't done a lot of. So our head of wellness ended up going to Northern Anna Bjurstam, who's been my partner in the business for 8 years or so. She ended up going to northern Chile and working with a really well-known shaman, and over the months kind of has become a card-carrying shaman. So we've introduced a whole bunch of energy programs that are not so common around around the wellness properties. So we did that. This year we've just launched, literally this week. Actually, the press release went out around uh, what we're doing around reconnection and wellness days themselves, and rituals, which we believe have a role to play in wellness. Each property has come up with a number of their own days, and these could be programming for 4 or 5 hours or the whole day. But the goal is to try and deepen and broaden the wellness offering, make it more accessible, but again, not having people be obliged to commit to, say, 3 or 4 days of intense activity, when perhaps the couple or the family may just want to be together and take it easy, and particularly in this, as we move into a post-COVID world. I mean, everyone's talking about reconnection now, and we believe very strongly, and in fact, it's been our mission as a company right from the beginning. We talk about connection and reconnection. Those programs, if you like, the content for this year. And the wellness innovation team do very little other than kind of sit around and think, okay, what are we going to move into? What do we need to develop over the next 12 months or so? How do we continue all the time to enhance our offering?
Well, that's called, I mean, that's pretty unique for a hotel.
It is. We are in the hotel business for sure, but obviously we have some wonderful hotels. But I was talking about this earlier today. I also consider that we are a wellness company. We're not just a hotel group that does wellness. It's way too important for us, and it's so deeply embedded into the DNA of the organization. Um, and as I said earlier, I believe that and our approach to sustainability is really what differentiates us from some of the very good competitors that we're up against all the time.
Yeah. So how do you look at sustainability when it comes to building and designing your resorts?
Well, it forms pretty much every decision we make, and we it's very much a part of our standards. So when owners come to us and say we want to build the Six Senses, the first thing we do is talk about sustainability and wellness and what that means to them and potentially the business, but also what it means in terms of the development of the property and how they're built and the kind of spaces that we need. So we have very, very deep technical standards around both platforms, and we will know early on in a negotiation if a potential owner really shares our view of both those functions, and if they don't, the likelihood is that we probably won't do the deal. But then when it comes to sustainability, there's construction standards, there's designation. All our properties need to be at a minimum of a LEED silver or LEED silver or equivalent, ideally gold. Actually, that's really what we ask for. And the materials that are used need to be healthy. It's also where wellness and sustainability actually meet. There's a sweet spot. So it's important for us to do healthy buildings that are then sustainable at the same time. So it's very much, materials, natural materials, local materials, alternative sources of energy, how we handle water, and so on. So that's all around the development side of things. And then from an operating perspective, I mean, we haven't had plastic in the properties for 20 years. I mean, there's amenity bottles have never been plastic.
Hmm.
The whole straw thing, which everyone's making a big fuss of now. Well, that doesn't, it's never really existed with us. We have something called an Earth Lab. So uh, we recycle, we compost, we grow our own food. So from an operating perspective, there's no plastic water bottles. We do our own water. You can't get a Perrier or a San Pellegrino at a Six Senses because we don't want to be shipping water around the world.
Right.
So some people get irritated by that, but most don't because they understand that it's very important to us, and that's part of our belief set. And then there's the outreach, the community stuff. So we're very involved with the community. 0.5% of our revenues are allocated to sustainable initiatives, regardless of what how much that is. It just goes into a pot, is spent locally at the properties, and that's also a commitment and very unusual for hotel groups to do that. But it's not negotiable. If an owner says no, 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 I don't want to do it, then we tend to say, well, you kind of have to do it if you want us, because everyone else does it, and I can't have one hotel not do it, and it's just not right. So the integrity around our sustainability practice is very high, actually.
You know,
Uh,
I was reading an article recently where you were talking about when you took the helm of Six Senses. Was it 2012? You said, the whole world of luxury hotels was becoming homogeneous, and my
yeah,
own passion was wellness. And here was a group that was small and had a potential to become global with a DNA that resonated with me on a personal level. So, what did you see in Six Senses at the time that showed untapped potential and a way to make money?
yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I came from the world of Four Seasons and 15 years and private equity, and there was just something about Six Senses, and having, I lived in Asia for a long time with Four Seasons, so knew Six Senses very, very intimately. They were around the corner to us,
Right.
and there was just something very special about them, and had been for years, and particularly in sustainability, probably more so there than in wellness. They were much stronger, and they were doing things before anyone was talking about it, and it resonated to me, and just on very deeply on a personal level. And although I'd spent most of my career in some great companies and great luxury groups, I was just kind of feeling that it wasn't enough anymore. And there needed to be a greater purpose in doing what we were doing. And I saw that opportunity in Six Senses. And that it was a group that back then was really just in Southeast Asia, but I saw the potential that to take it globally, and had the opportunity to um, to be part of the acquisition of Six Senses by a group out of New York, who really, really cared about the planet and cared about wellness, and that's all they invested in. And so we had great support behind us to really explode those two platforms, and really take them much further than had been done in the previous 15 years or so. So, and to take the group global. At the time, as I say, we were just in Southeast Asia, but the goal was very much to make it a global platform, which we achieved over the last 8 years, actually.
I imagine you put a lot of thought into the development and design of each hotel, not only culturally sensitive to the regions, but maintaining sustainable practices.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, each hotel, I mean, we're never going to have hundreds of hotels. That's just not the way it is. And you can't, at the level of the market where we function, it's impossible to do that. So it's really about one hotel at a time. And often people ask, how many hotels do you want? How many will you have? And I have to answer that. It's never about how many. And as long as the next hotel is as good or better than the ones before, and that we can continue to innovate and get creative and increase what we do in wellness and really involve we call them hosts, all our employees in sustainable practice, and have them really believe what they're doing. I mean, we've done our job, and that in itself will drive growth. I mean, I was talking to our development guys this morning, and and arguably this year is the worst year in my career ever in our business.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've signed 8 new management contracts this year, which for a company with 18 operating hotels, it's a lot of deals to sign
Right.
in the worst year ever. And I really believe that that's in big part a result of our position on sustainable practice, because the train has left the station. 5-10 years ago, it was a bad word, and everybody, it costs too much, and is it worth it, and so on. But thank goodness that's changed, and people have bought into it, and it's not going backwards, that's for sure.
Yeah. And you seem to work with both, world renowned architecture firms, like the Archangels and some up and coming firms to design your properties. So how do you select an architect who can translate the Six Senses brand? And are there certain core values that each project must adhere to?
Yeah, very much so, and particularly around sustainability. I mean, you talk about Biarca. I mean, the first time I met Biarca was probably 15 or so years ago at maybe even longer, actually, at the TED Global Conference that took place then in Oxford in England. And he got up on the stage and talked about his vision of the world and vision of cities of the future and the sustainability thing. And from that moment, I need to work with this guy. He's way ahead of where
Yeah.
we are, and it's an absolute pleasure. And since then, he's become like one of the greats. Back then, he wasn't so well known, but today, I mean, he is what he is. We also have had the good fortune of working with Kengo Kuma, who's kind of the equivalent out of Japan, who also just totally believes in sustainability and sustainable construction and materials and so on. So unless they really feel it, and our value set resonates with them, again, it's just probably not going to work. So we tend not to go down that road because it becomes too hard. We don't expect everyone to be experts in those two fields, but we do expect them to care about it. If they care about it, we can work and help and guide, and because we have a ton of people that's all they do. But if it doesn't resonate with them, then what's the point? then we'll go somewhere else, and it won't work out well. They'll get frustrated with us, and we'll the vice versa.
Is it a long interview process when you speak with architects?
Well, it is. I mean, we need to get to know each other. We do a very long orientation to them on what the brand is and what it stands for and so on. So, it can be a few weeks before, if we talk to two or three architects for a specific project, and then, how much do they cost? Then you've got the commercial piece of it, but more it's about what do they feel, and what does a site say to them, and we're very much about keeping things just very natural and flowing, and as I said earlier, understated and beautiful and well designed. I mean, we've evolved. 10, 15 years ago, we were much more rustic than we are today.
Mm-hmm.
And the early Six Senses were, you kind of Robinson Crusoe like, and very, very, very rustic. So we've changed that because we think the guest has changed, and things need to be more designed and a little more refined than perhaps they were back then. But that still doesn't detract from what materials we use and keeping things very natural. I would just say that perhaps they're a little bit more sophisticated than they were 10 years ago, but still with that same focus on materials used, where they come from, provenance, and keeping things very natural.
Yeah, and most of Six Senses resorts are located in these exquisite and remote locations. So, in the initial outbreak of the pandemic, did you have to close many resorts? I can imagine everything was moving so fast and changing by the day.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, we closed everything very quickly, and then dealt with fallout of that and all the labor issues and legislation in 20 something countries that we were dealing with, which were everything, each country is different, obviously. So
Right.
today, we're open. We shut everything probably and started closing end of April, and started opening again in August, I think. It was, well, Vietnam opened before then,
Right.
but today Bhutan is still closed. Fiji is closed. Cambodia is closed. That's it. We have three that are still shut. And we did have a bunch of properties that were going to open this year, and they've all been delayed, which
Right.
is probably not a bad thing, and wouldn't have been a great idea to open in a new hotel at COVID. Even though our property in Israel, for example, in the Six Senses Shaharut in the Negev Desert, has been ready since April, and we chose not to open it for obvious reasons.
How have the levels of business been since the ones that you have reopened?
Varied depending where we are. I mean, China is doing extremely well. Vietnam is doing well. Thailand less so. We did well in Portugal the last few months. We've just closed that now for a couple of months to do some improvement work during the winter. We were very hopeful for a great season in Courchevel, but now that all the ski mountains in France won't open until the end of January. Now that was announced a couple of weeks back, and restaurants don't open until after Christmas. So the key here is you have to be nimble, because the rules change every day,
Right.
and keeping up with what's going on in so many countries is not
Yeah,
simple.
yeah, just navigating the challenges of every
Yeah,
country.
I know, but we got good people, and we move pretty fast, so that's helpful. But it's certainly been hugely disruptive to our employees' lives, and that's the heartbreak of it. But
Yeah.
we're getting through it. We're getting through it.
What shifts in guest expectations and demands are people having now? The ones that are starting to come back.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a little early but what we're sensing is that, whereas in the past people may have gone on a trip and stayed at 2 or 3 places, I think that's not happening as much anymore, and people will stay longer and in one place, and they don't want to move around. They're mindful of health and safety, obviously, although I think at our level of the market, there's a huge amount of trust that we're going to do the right thing and keep the place clean and so on and so forth. So, but they want to know that we are doing what needs to be done in that area. Now, fortunately, in most of our properties, because they're spread out, we don't really have hotels in hotel type buildings, so
Yeah, so social distancing is really not
yeah,
much of an
it's
issue.
already built in, and probably 80% of our hotels are warm weather, so restaurants are outdoor, and
Right. If there's anything that the pandemic accelerated, it's the importance of well-being,
yeah.
particularly how we live and work and travel. And after months of living like this, there's been a huge realization that there has to be a better way to build a future that's more fulfilling, more empathetic, and more sustainable. So do you think coming out of this crisis will focus on a future with wellness at the core?
Well, I think, and as I tell my teams and our travel agents and travel partners, I mean, for us, it was relevant pre-COVID, but it's even more relevant now for all the reasons that you've just mentioned. And I think people are much more mindful and circumspect about some of this stuff. I think it's had people go inward perhaps more than they typically would, and we see an increase in meditation classes and yoga, and people are being more thoughtful about everything, and some of these programs that we've come up with in our reconnection days, are based around empathy and gratitude, and can get a little spiritual if one wants. And I actually believe and that one of the results of this pandemic is that people are kinder to each other than perhaps they were in the past. And, political issues aside, we sense that's the case, and people are talking to each other more and being more helpful to each other. And that is just a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a positive piece that is coming out of COVID.
So if wellness and sustainability is, since its inception of success, has been really the two primary pillars. So how do you broaden and deepen something that's already, you're doing so well? And are there any new offerings and concepts that you've been testing?
Well, as I say, the reconnection programming that a lot of the properties have come back together with, and taking a deeper dive into the spiritual side of things, the energy piece that I had mentioned earlier on, or the energy medicine approach is pretty new. A lot of the two, it's interesting that the two huge causes of illness that are really problematic, and one has been around a while and another is now getting a lot of press, and is loneliness, which is really impacting people's well-being, particularly in the cities, and mental wellness, which during COVID has become even more market in terms of how many people are suffering. So we have dived into programs around the brain, and we have neuroscientists and that work with us, and are trying to put together in the past and continue to work on you know programs that we call around brain beauty, and around manipulating the brain in a positive way, and ways of thinking and behaving that really can make a difference to your state of mind and how you perceive your life. And I know that starts to get a little deep, and it's not what everybody wants to get into if you're going on a 10-day vacation somewhere, but some people do. So going back to my point earlier on about having a layered approach to wellness, and doing as much or as little as you want. But I think you're going to see, particularly with us, a much deeper approach towards mental well-being as we move into next year and the year after.
One of the things that impressed me was early on in the pandemic, since Six Senses launched this at home with Six Senses program, where you had wellness experts from around the world, offering tips and tools for stay-at-home customers through video tutorials and recipes and workouts, et cetera. So do you see this program being a mainstay long-term, even when people start to travel again? Because to me, when I saw this, this seems like a great way to impact your customers between stays.
Yeah. I do, I do, Scott, and we got into it by default, and however good we are at some things, we weren't very good when it came to digital, and consequently we put the content together very quickly. It was not produced as such. It was very raw, but we went out within about 5 or 6 days of things shutting down, and we're doing yoga classes from our head of yoga's living room in North Delhi to I don't know, all kinds of things from all over the world, and the reaction to it was amazing. Actually, we were shocked, and that was called At Home with Six Senses, and then we started something called Friends of Six Senses, where we pretty much had our own talk show, and Anna, who I've mentioned before, who runs wellness, was interviewing just a whole array of really interesting personalities who were doing interesting things in wellness and sustainability, and so on. And the commentary we got was that it resonated with people because it was so raw, and we were told, don't go and overproduce these things as you move forward. So I think we are going to produce them a little bit, but the one decision that we made is that we absolutely want to keep it going. And we've gone away, or I'd say away from wellness, but we've gone into all kinds of things now, because it can go way beyond just wellness and what we're doing in sustainability, and it's activities, it's it's learning of all kinds of things that we can do. We're even looking at perhaps having chefs work with people to do dinner parties on and help them cook through things as they prepare the food. I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas that are coming out of the innovation team, but it's definitely here to stay.
Do you see yourself ramping up digital strategies moving forward?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're located in the most Instagrammable locations in the world.
Yeah, we are. So very much so, and we had a hiring freeze going on over the past few months, just because of the lack of business. But the one area where we've said, no, we really need to beef up our resource is in the area of digital and and social. Actually, we need to get a bit
Yeah.
better at social media, and we're not bad. And we run a social media academy every year for participants from all the properties, but it's really become so scientific now, and you just got to be ahead of that curve. So that's where we're recruiting, in those two areas.
So, what are some of the important things that you've learned from this crisis over the last 9 months when it comes to your guests, your employees, partners, and even the local communities where your resorts are?
It's very humbling, the whole experience has been very humbling, because we do work in the developing world, and in some of our places, people are not paid huge amounts of money. But what's become very clear to me is that we are very much a family, and I think because of our size, it's maybe perhaps easier to do, but because of our approach to what we care about, which also kind of moves into, I mean, wellness is not just for our guests, it's also about what we do for our hosts. And we have a very complex employee wellness program called Mission Wellness, and you know we're all doing a lot of stuff together to keep ourselves well and sane, and I think what that does is it brings that group much closer together. So the commitment from people, the pulling together during the hardship where everyone's been on reduced pay, and just like everybody else in the world, but and the absolute need to communicate as a leadership group often and very transparently to all of our hosts. I mean, we're, I don't know, between 4,000 and 5,000 hosts around the world, including the corporate group, and we're trying very hard to talk to them all the time. We talk to our general managers together once a week now, and we never did that before. The leadership group corporately speak 3 times a week now. We never did that before, and that's been a great learning for me, as to the impact of that connection and communication. Has just made us so much stronger, and makes it really kind of heartwarming.
Millions of travelers have postponed long haul air and travel till next year and beyond. However, it appears that luxury travelers are more optimistic, making plans and holding on to those reservations made pre coronavirus. Are you seeing this kind of resilience among your customers? Has there been this strong save rate on customers keeping their reservations?
Yeah, they have. I mean, the challenge has been, I mean, the bookings are there, but the problem is the bigger problem is transportation and open borders, and as it said before, the rules change so often that with all the goodwill in the world, there have been a good number of cancellations, because people, not because of lack of desire, but just because people can't get to us, and that's the bigger problem. But when they can, and we too, we are super optimistic about the future, and we think our segment of the market is going to be the first to return. um, the demand is strong, is very pent up, and people just want to go away and go to places where they're comfortable and safe, and perhaps can contribute and learn something.
Yeah, and it seems like luxury travel will now have, will be about this balancing industry standards of safety with satisfying guest experiences. And it seems the definition of luxury is going to have to expand to things like trust and flexibility and safety.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
these qualities will remain paramount for the foreseeable future. Do you agree?
I do. And as I say, I think at our level of the market, people generally do trust. The expectation is high, but if you can't provide a hygienic kind of clean environment, we have bigger problems. But that's what we've got to do, and we've got to give people reasons, and we've got to make sure that they leave and go home in a better place than when they arrived, and that's very much the goal, and what everyone works to.
What is in the cards now for Six Senses? I know, some properties have been on hold in terms of reopening. I'm sure some developments have been put on hold. And I know you're planning to open a Six Senses in Chelsea here in New York City in 2021, by the High Line, which I'm
Yeah,
very excited about. It's the brand's, I think, first hotel in North America. So,
yeah.
first of all, what can we expect from the New York City property that's very different?
Well, it, it's it's beautiful from an architectural perspective. It was Bjarke Ingels who designed it. It's two towers.
Yeah.
One is residential, one is half residential and half hotel. We're on both the High Line and on the Hudson, so we've got the water views and the bridge too. But I think and it's been designed by the interior is a wonderful group out of Paris called Gilles Boissier. They in fact did. I was part of the group that built the Baccarat Hotel and they did that for me. Nothing, the Six Senses will be nothing like that, but a great aesthetic, and they've really helped us translate a Six Senses resort ethos into, one of the, if not the most sophisticated city in the world. So we're super excited about the design. It'd be very different to anything else in the city. But the big deal is that we have an amazing spa, which not so many properties in New York have. It's about a 15,000 square foot spa with our version of a modern day bathhouse and some really cool wet wet circuits in there. And we're doing a club. It will be the first ever club that we do called Six Senses Place, which is very much a social club. But
I talking about a private club. So
yeah,
do you have to,
membership.
okay. So
Yeah.
can you be a member of the club without, so
You can.
you don't have to be staying there. You don't have to have a
No,
residency.
no. In fact, on the contrary, I think that most people there will not be hotel guests,
Right.
you know,
So like a
or
Soho club kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Soho house. Right.
still, but yeah, a little more upscale and way more wellness. And in fact, the main ethos of the club will be around having fun, but with a very, very strong wellness content to it, and practitioners there in the club. So you can go on programs. And I mean, we see that as being essential and as a way of connecting the dots between our resorts and doing these clubs in the few urban locations where we're going to do hotels, that when you come back from Vietnam or Turkey or wherever to London or New York, that you can continue what you were doing in the resorts in an urban environment, and on a more regular basis. So we're kind of excited about the stretch. I call it a brand stretch, if you like, but into an area that we think is very relevant today, and again more so than pre-COVID, in these gateway cities.
Yeah. When is it scheduled to open? 21.
Well, I'm hopeful we'll open end of next year,
Yeah.
or we'll
That's
open
great.
the hotel. The club may be a little bit longer, but I mean next year will be pretty busy for us because we've taken over a new little hotel outside Sao Paulo in Brazil. That will be the first new Six Senses for next year, and then we will open in Israel, in the Negev Desert in soft open March, April. We'll open in Ibiza in Spain in midsummer, probably June, July. Rajasthan in India, a restoration of a beautiful old fort. That's probably September, October, and then hopefully finish the year with New York.
Any new travel trends you see emerging?
Really just more mindful travel, and not the travel frenzy that's been there in the past. And I think there are some new destinations. I think somewhere like Iceland, for example. I mean, I think the sustainable travel, or what's being now called regenerative travel, is, I mean, it's subtle, the difference, but I think that's what it's about. And when I said earlier, people want to go home in a better place, I think that's kind of what we mean by regenerative travel, that there really is a big takeaway from it. There's learning, and you just feel better when you get home.
So, Neil, my final question, which is the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests.
Yeah.
If you were stranded on a deserted island and you could only have one luxury item, what would that luxury item be? It can't be any form of transportation or anything that requires mobile service.
Yeah.
You're just there on this deserted island and you have one luxury item with you.
Yeah. Well,
What
I'm
would
going
it
to
be?
answer. I'm going to answer that in a slightly different way, because what's happened to me personally, I mean, quite a bit's happened to me personally during COVID, but one of my big things is that I rediscovered cycling, and I'm currently doing, I don't know, a couple of 100 kilometers a week
Hmm.
on my bike around Singapore. And one of the things about it for me is that I get into a zone, and it's almost like a walking, where people do walking meditations or
Right.
silent meditations. I get into that same zone on my bike. And it's quite extraordinary, because I haven't been on a bicycle probably since I was 15. I thought what I really would want is a fantastic bicycle to cycle around this island and get into this stage, or into this zone of meditative zone, which has proven to be very useful and healing for me. So there you go.
Neil Jacobs, CEO of Six Senses, thank you for coming on the show, and happy holidays and good luck with everything in 2021.
Thanks so much, Scott. A pleasure.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.